الرئيس بيل كلينتون من أكثر الشخصيات المعروفة في العالم كله. أسس الرئيس الأمريكي مبادرة كلينتون العالمية CGI، مبادرة تجمع الحكومات، قادة العالم وأصحاب المؤسسات الخيرية لمواجهة ومعالجة أكبر التحديات من حول العالم. قابلت مؤخراً في مراكش المغرب. خلونا نشوف.
President Clinton, you need no introduction. But this part of the world knows you predominantly as the 42nd President of the United States. Why did you choose to come to Morocco?
Because the Middle East and Africa together have the youngest populations in the world. The Middle East and Africa are both bedeviled by what I would call bad press. That is, all the problems are very well reported, and honestly, and should be. But all the good things that are happening are not so well known outside the neighborhoods in which they're occurring.
Yeah.
And I don't think you can make good decisions and plan the future very well if all you know is the bad news. You need to know the good news. Governments have to stop big bad things from happening, but people can make good things happen. And that's essentially why I wanted to come here.
Absolutely. We also have the phenomena of ISIS right now, which is in my home country, Iraq, is literally disintegrating it. They are also cross boundaries that we never saw before. They are killing journalists, they're killing humanitarian aid workers, they have slave market for women. This is shocking, not only for the world, it's shocking for the people in the region as well, and for all Muslims. How do we turn it around, the challenge of ISIS itself?
First, I think it's important to look at what they're doing. They want to occupy land and actually create alternative governance structures based on their imagined notion of how the caliphate operated in the 8th century. And I say imagined because it's really not accurate based on all the evidence we have.
Yeah.
And they want to terrify everybody else by having 10-year-olds lead people to their beheadings, and if possible, do it where everyone can see it on the internet. So I think that we have to counter them. They will lose if the wishes of the people they're trying to roll over are heard. And I believe I know there's controversy about what's going on in Yemen between the Saudis and the Houthis, but the good news is that the Saudis are sufficiently worried about ISIS that they're willing to take action on their own instead of just asking other people to do it and saying, I'll pay for it. I believe we'll beat them just by getting more and more people at the grassroots level to stand up and say no.
Absolutely.
That's what I think will happen.
Absolutely. I want to talk about the misconceptions you talk about of the images of people in the region. I think as an Arab woman, I think the misconceptions are particularly on women. But you're one of the most familiar people in the region. What do you think the misconceptions are? And what are some of the positive images that are coming that you've encountered personally?
Well, I think, for example, most Americans have no idea that there are more women than men in institutions of higher education in Saudi Arabia. What's going on, for example, in Bahrain, there's been a lot of negative publicity because of the tension between the Shiite majority, most of them concentrated in rural poor areas, and the Sunni ruling family. But during that time, Bahrain went from 39th to 13th on the World Bank's index of competitive countries. During that time, they became the only country in the world that had an economic policy setting mechanism that was only half government, half private sector, with women fully represented. I don't think most people know that. That doesn't mean that they shouldn't be fair to the Shiites and that we shouldn't resolve this, but it's like nobody knows any of the good stuff. I could go through, I think nearly nobody in America knows that last year the UAE surpassed Norway to become the #1 country in the world in giving foreign assistance to poor people as a percentage of their GDP. And so I think that we shouldn't sweep the problems under the rug, but we certainly shouldn't sweep the progress under the rug.
So there's still a challenge. We still have a higher rate of women in the education, but we do not have them in the workforce. How do you think we should tackle that? And what's your input or advice to not only the political leaderships, but also the business leaderships of the region?
Well, first of all, I think that one reason it got worse is because of all the political upheaval. What happened in Egypt affected a huge number of people. And I think what happened in Syria made a big difference, because Syria, even when it was highly authoritarian under President Assad and his father, was one of the most open places in the Middle East in terms of involving women in government and in the private sector. So I think that there are lots of very specific reasons that this gap got worse. And then the Saudis, because they haven't crossed the driving divide, have educated all these women, and then they're not moving into the workforce, and some of them can't get to work. My advice is that those of us who are not in political positions should keep working at it, could keep looking at ways to provide financing through crowdfunding or other microcredit mechanisms to keep creating space for the human potential of the Middle East to thrive.
When I told young Arab women on my team that I'm going to be interviewing you, the first question they wanted to know is, what kind of a husband will you be for potentially the first female president of the United States of America?
If she's fortunate enough to be nominated and to be elected, I will do whatever I'm asked to do. I think that it's important not to forget that this year we will have been married 40 years. So I know her better than anybody else does. And I think that having been in that position, sometimes the most important thing you can do is just to be there, to be a sounding board, to, help people get through the tough days, to realize that when you get up every day, you should see the glass as half full so you can focus on what you can get done. But no human being does that. We all get up, some days we get up and we see the glass is half empty. But when you're the leader of a country, that has enormous consequences to everybody else. So, my trying to keep her laughing in a positive frame of mind might be a good thing, and remind her that we're grandparents and that makes everything all right.
I want a last question, which is, I am very personally very grateful for you, because you know that when I was only 25 years old, refugee immigrant from Iraq, you gave me an award at the White House for my humanitarian work in Bosnia. I don't know if you knew about the fear I had in my life and the shame I had in my life. The fear that, my family knew Saddam, and the shame of being an abused wife at one point in my life. And yet what you saw is the acknowledgement of the work. So you have a big heart, and I have experienced your big heart. What keeps your heart big all the time?
I remember every morning how lucky I am. I got to live the life of my dreams. There have only been 2 governors of very small states elected President of the United States in the whole history. I got to serve. I loved every job I had. I've loved every stage of my life. Loved growing up in Arkansas and going home and becoming governor. I loved being president, and I've loved this work I've done since then. And when you have been fortunate, even when wacky things are happening, in election seasons, wacky things happen in America, you have to keep remembering how lucky you are and trying to give other people those chances. And I was impressed with you when you were 25, because I knew more about your background than you thought. And my mother had a tough childhood, just like Hilary's mother did. And my mother had a tough young adulthood. And yet, every single day of my childhood, she refused to be a victim. Whenever I see somebody like you acting like that, it renews my faith in humanity, and I wake up in a good humor the next day. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you. Really.
هيلاري كلينتون ستدخل التاريخ بمجرد خوضها للانتخابات الأمريكية، والداعم الأول إلها هو زوجها. هذا شيء رائع. شكرا لك يا سيد الرئيس كلينتون.